The ghost that saved my life. I'm a trucker, and I travel extensively throughout Mexico. On some of my trips, I've experienced terrifying and unexplainable things. What I'm about to tell you happened on the infamous Rumorosa highway, heading towards Tijuana. I was transporting sugar from Guadalajara, a journey that would take around 48 hours, maybe even longer due to the heavy load. Almost 40 hours later, I arrived in Mexicali. I was tired from lack of sleep but still had to cross the Rumorosa. Anyone familiar with that road knows it's dangerous because of its steep slopes, sharp curves, and deep ravines, not to mention the stories told about that dark place. I considered resting for a few hours, but I was already running late, so I decided to continue. I grabbed a coffee at a roadside stand and resumed my journey. It was already past midnight. As I got back into my truck, I saw a woman making gestures in my rearview mirror. It was dark, so I couldn't see her clearly, but I noticed she wasn't standing on the ground. I thought I hadn't caught her image properly in the mirror. She was wearing white with long, loose hair, which also struck me as odd because she was shaking intensely, even though there was no wind. Still, I got out to see what she wanted, but when I walked around the trailer, she was gone. I won't deny it, I was a little scared, but I didn't dwell on it. I had to get to Tecate. A few hours later, around 2 in the morning, halfway through the Rumorosa, I turned on the radio. I needed some noise. The coffee had kicked in, but I needed to stay awake. There was a silence so profound it felt sepulchral. The night felt incredibly gloomy. I didn't realize it, but I was already nodding off, my eyes closing on their own. I don't know how long it was, but suddenly, I heard a woman's voice saying, "Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Wake up." It was a whisper, but very clear, dark, and loud enough to jolt me awake. The radio was filled with static, and the cabin felt abnormally cold. I glanced to my side and saw her. It was the same woman who had been waving to me in Mexicali, but she looked different. She was pale, gaunt, and her clothes were dirty. She was dark. She was there, silent, staring at me with a chilling gaze that shook me to my core. She raised her hand slightly and pointed towards the road ahead. That's when I realized I was heading straight for the edge, a very deep ravine. It was only seconds away. I quickly and forcefully turned the steering wheel, managing to control the truck and brake just in time, avoiding a fatal accident. When I turned to thank her and ask how she had gotten into the cab, she was gone. She had vanished, leaving me terrified. I was trembling and drenched in cold sweat. I had been face to face with death and a ghostly apparition in my cabin. I made the sign of the cross, entrusting myself to God, and continued my journey. I've passed through that area many times since, and I always remember that macabre day. It still gives me the chills, but I'm grateful to that ghost who saved me from certain death. I'm alive to tell this story because of her. The strange creature. I've been a trailer driver for years, traveling from Mexico to the United States and countless destinations. I've seen many strange things on the road, which is why I usually avoid driving at night. You never know what you'll encounter. But even in broad daylight, I believe I saw a giant once. I say that because I saw a huge being running down from the mountains, about 300 meters away. However, I dismissed it as my imagination. But on a Monday, October 12th, I was returning to Mexicali from the United States, and something happened that was definitely not a hallucination. I was eager to see my family, so I was hurrying. Because of daylight saving time, it gets dark around 5 p.m., and my estimated arrival time was 10 p.m. Coming from the San Diego area towards Interstate 8, you pass through what could be considered the American side of the Rumorosa, part of the same mountain range but on this side of the border. The trailer was heavily loaded as I drove through that section. As I ascended a hill, a recreational vehicle passed me, which caught my attention because of the motorcycles it was carrying. I assumed it was an American family spending a weekend on the West Coast. They overtook me on the inclines, and then came a long descent. As I started to go down, I saw them pick up speed. Through the rearview mirror, I noticed a fellow trucker behind me with very bright, almost blinding lights. They illuminated a large portion of the mountains when, suddenly, on one of those mountains, I saw a giant dog running from above. At first, I thought it was strange, a dog on the Rumorosa? And such a large one. I tried to get a better look when, suddenly, while running, it stood up on two legs that were very long, while the front legs were short. Reaching the road, that thing crossed in front of the RV that had passed me, causing them to lose control and nearly fall into the ravine. Luckily, they stopped in time. I stopped behind them to help. I saw a man get out, looking very nervous, along with his son. The man approached me and asked if I had also seen the dog that ran in front of him. I confirmed that I had. Talking to him, I realized he was avoiding the issue of the animal's size and the fact that it ran on two legs. But eventually, he had no choice but to ask if I had also seen it running that way. I said yes, I clearly saw it. I asked if he knew what kind of animal it could be. He didn't answer directly. He looked terrified and only said that he didn't believe in any of that kind of stuff. Just seconds later, we both heard rocks moving on the other side of the road. I was completely unnerved, but I tried to ignore it. Then, the man's son spoke up, suggesting it might be a skinwalker. His father interrupted him, insisting he didn't believe it. But then, a terrible growl, the loudest I had ever heard, echoed through the air. I swear I could feel my hair stand on end. At that moment, we turned to see where the sound was coming from, and all three of us clearly saw a pair of pointed ears poking out from behind the stones. Overcome with terror, we all ran to our vehicles. I sped away as fast as my trailer's engine would allow. I could barely breathe from the fright. I don't know what that beast was, but I swear this story is completely true. One curious detail I noticed that day was that, as I began to ascend the Rumorosa, there were many police patrol cars at the foot of one of the mountains. I thought there had been an accident, but I didn't see any wrecked vehicles. However, I remember the officers had powerful lamps that they were using to illuminate the mountains, and some even had their weapons drawn. One was signaling for us to move quickly as if they were urging us to leave the area as soon as possible. I thank God for getting me home safely that night. The spectre that climbed my trailer. This happened to Felipe in 2015. He said, it was approximately 12 at night, and I was driving through the famous Rumorosa, well known for the number of accidents that happen there. It's a pass of about 20 kilometers with very dangerous curves and ravines, especially during the rainy season, as the area is extremely high, and the water on the road freezes into ice. I was heading to Guadalajara with a load of clothes, with 2 days to deliver it. Rain was falling heavily on the roof of my trailer, and I could barely see the road. There were moments when I literally couldn't see anything. I couldn't pull over to rest because the rest areas were flooded. I had no choice but to keep going slowly. Suddenly, my skin began to crawl. A cold shiver ran through me, as if warning me that something bad was about to happen. I was about halfway down when I saw a car parked directly in front of me. I was driving slowly and braked to a stop in front of the car. I was going to help the person, but I was surprised because the car was simply there, empty. I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone. I found it very strange and decided to return to my trailer and continue. As I entered the cab, another cold shiver ran through me. I felt an intense cold inside. I just wanted to get out of there and started the engine. After a few kilometers, I heard a voice from behind me saying, "Take me to my house, please." I stopped abruptly and looked back towards the sleeping area. I turned on the light, but no one was there. Terror began to creep into my thoughts, even though I don't believe in the paranormal. My mind raced, and panic took over. But I gathered my strength and continued. The night and the panic I felt made me want to accelerate to get out of the Rumorosa. But at the same time, I slowed down, not wanting panic to cause a crash and my death. I tried to calm down when, suddenly, I felt a black shadow emerge from the bed and cross between the seats. I couldn't turn to look because I was driving, but my body was shaking, and I started to pray. I had to be brave, so I stopped the trailer. When I turned around, the panic and terror of what I saw made me scream. There was a young woman there, with clothes that seemed to be stained with blood. I ran from the trailer screaming, "Please, I haven't done anything to you. Let me go." I started walking away from the truck, down the road, when I saw the headlights of another truck approaching in the distance. You can't imagine the joy I felt just seeing it. I waited, and when he arrived, he asked what had happened to my trailer, which was about 200 meters up the road with the engine running, and why I was so far away. When I explained what had happened, he told me that the same thing had happened to another colleague of his, but he had crashed, been hospitalized, and died a few days later. Before he died in the hospital, he had written down everything that had happened to him, and it matched the story I had just told him. From that day on, I realized that the life of a trucker is very hard, and if you don't have nerves of steel, you can end up dead on the road. Many times, the police determine that accidents happen because drivers fall asleep, but truly, some take great secrets to the grave. Sometimes we witness paranormal events that we can't understand, and often, we die without explaining or telling what really happened to us.